Brilliant. Lord Neuberger, thank you very much for having us. I know you're a busy man, so I'm just going to dive straight in with the questions. I'm sure the past couple of weeks for you have been quite a nostalgic, reflective time. You've been a lawyer for going on 45 years now, and we are very keen to hear about your career, but if I may, I'd actually like to start by looking forward. You mentioned in last week's leaving valedictorian speech that you were going to be entering this new, unstructured chapter of your life. What is it exactly you're planning on doing with your retirement?
I can't say I have any firm plans. I suppose there are at least three possible, indeed likely strands. One is that I'm fortunate enough to be a peer, so I have the House of Lords as a possible place to go, and I think particularly with the implications of Brexit for the legal system, it would be right for me to go there and make such contributions as I can. Secondly, I've had the great honour of being made a Fellow of the Royal Society recently, and I have always been interested in science. I was actually originally a chemist when I was at university, and I think that I'm interested in science, and I'm very interested in the relationship between law and science in a number of respects, and that is something I'd like to contribute to. And the third thing I've got in mind is to do what lots of judges do. It's a bit sad in a way, which is to become an arbitrator. A number of international companies and countries don't want to go to court to have their disputes determined. They want it determined privately, and so they will have private hearings, arbitrations, where they will need arbitrators. And a number of former judges have done that, and I'll try my hand at that too.
Brilliant. You mentioned that you're quite keen to dabble in science, how the law and science interact, and as you mentioned, you did actually study chemistry at Oxford, I think it was.
That's right.
We've had a lot of talk from our readers, like STEM students actually, who are quite interested in getting into law. Do you think that given, especially given the rise of AI and tech in the legal profession, that actually STEM students may be certainly of more use than they would have been maybe 10, 15 years ago to the profession, or maybe even more useful to the profession than traditional law students are?
In one sense, that raises the age-old question: if you're going to university and want to be a lawyer, should you study law or not?
Yes.
And I think it's remarkable how many lawyers have very strong opinions about this. And I think normally their views are based on whether they read law or not. If they did study law, they tend to say you should. If they didn't, they say you shouldn't. I personally don't think there's a right answer. I think that there are advantages both ways. If you spend 3 years at university studying law, you get a really deep grounding in law, which you never quite get if you haven't done law at university. On the other hand, the experience and knowledge and mental training you get in another subject before you turn to law is of very great value. And if you just study law, you don't get that. So there's no right answer. In general, I'd say this: if you're determined to become a lawyer, and there's nothing much that particularly interests you, then I'd study law. But if there are other things that interest you, then do those other things, because although it'll set you back a year or two in your legal career, it will enrich and broaden your experience and knowledge. Turning to your specific question, I think that the most recent seminar I attended at the Royal Society about science and law was to do with AI, and you're absolutely right. It's a major issue in law, as it is in every other area of life. And I think students who've studied AI and other topics of relevance in science will have something to bring to law, not merely in terms of their training, but in terms of their actual knowledge.
Brilliant, thank you. So you're close to reaching your statutory retirement age now, and because of some changes to the judicial retirement system, not something I'm an expert in, you are actually going to be replaced by Lady Hale, who is actually a bit older than you.
That's right.
Had you not reached your statutory retirement age, would you have liked to stay on as the Supreme Court President, even for a little longer?
I probably would have stayed on for a little longer. I think 5 years is a good period to serve, and it's certainly good to go when people ask, why are you going, rather than asking, when are you going? And in general in life, whether it's social or professional, you should quit while you're still enjoying it rather than later. So I would have stayed a bit longer, I think. But the fact I'm going now, although I'm very sorry to go, and you're right, I'm feeling nostalgic already, I'm not, as it were, gutted.
I hope you agree with me that hopefully your presidency role will be left in safe hands with Lady Hale.
Certainly.
What's your relationship been with her in the past few years, and do you think she'll be a good successor for you?
I'm sure she'll be a good successor, and our relationship has been good. We're different people, and we have different outlooks in a number of respects, but I think that has been a very positive factor. We are fond of each other, we respect each other, and we enjoy our discussions. And I think she is a remarkably intelligent and humane person. And it's terrific that there's now a woman president, and it's very good that it's her.
Brilliant. I agree with you. And as we were just discussing off camera, because of your retirement and retirement of 2 more of your justices, 3 more justices are going to be elevated to the Supreme Court. Do you have any killer parting words of wisdom for them?
Well, I suppose I would say you're all first-class judges. I was on the panel that selected them, so I obviously think they are. And have excellent collegiate qualities. Just be themselves and do the same job as they've done in the Court of Appeal in this court.
They are all coming from the Court of Appeal, which I believe is a similar route to your accession to the Supreme Court.
Roughly speaking, yeah.
Is it very different what the role entails?
I think if you're going to, it may be a slight exaggeration, but it's the Court of Appeal feels more like a school, and the Supreme Court feels more like a monastery or nunnery. It's a slight exaggeration, but certainly the Court of Appeal is a more buzzy place. You're in the Royal Courts of Justice. There are many more of the Court of Appeal than there are the Supreme Court, but on top of that, in the Royal Courts of Justice, you have the High Court judges, the masters, and so on. So it's very busy. If you're in the Rolls building, it also is very, very much more busy and buzzy, if you like. Here it tends to be quieter. The pace is slower and quieter. But basically, it should be the same. You've got a group of judges who are working together and are each having to do their own judicial job. Judicial independence is individual as well as collegiate. And I suppose one of the biggest differences is that you see much more of the same people. If you sit 5, sometimes 7 or even 9 out of 12, you'll often be sitting with the same person or people. If you're sitting 3 out of about 40, which is in the Court of Appeal, you might go as much as a year without sitting with a particular person.
So is it fair to say the Supreme Court justices are maybe a bit more pally than the Court of Appeal judges are?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I suppose I shall be a lawyer and say it depends what you mean by pally. But they see more of each other. We have lunch together. I'm very keen on that because I think that if you see each other in court all the time and nowhere else, your relationship can be a little bit odd. If you see each other over lunch, I'm not saying everybody lunches every day with everybody else, but we do lunch together, and I don't say I encourage people to go in and out of each other's rooms, but I observe that it happens. I think is a good thing, and there is therefore a slightly more cohesive relationship, I suppose, inevitably, than with 40 of you.
That's really nice to hear. And it's quite interesting that you say the Court of Appeal is perhaps a more buzzy place, because at least from legal journalism circles, the past year has been a very busy one for the Supreme Court. This leads me seamlessly to discuss the Miller case with you, if that's okay.
Yes.
You did a live stream with some of your other justices with the Law Society of Scotland a couple of weeks ago. And in it you spoke about the Article 50 case, and you mentioned that you actually felt a bit nervous before you gave your judgment. Can I ask what it was that prompted those nerves?
I think it was partly inside the court. It was the first time we'd sat 11, but it was more the realisation that there was a great deal of media attention and attention from many citizens and a lot of barristers and non-lawyers in court. And it was just the pressure of publicity, if you like. I mean, I don't think I lost any sleep over it. You can never be quite sure. But yeah, I was definitely a bit nervous. I didn't realise till I started speaking that I was nervous, but when I heard my voice, internally as it were, I thought, David, you're nervous.
Has there been any other case, maybe during your presidency or your legal career more generally, that it was comparable to that in terms of media and political attention?
No, there hasn't. I was quite nervous in my first case here. I was quite nervous in my first case in the Court of Appeal, but that sort of first night nerves, if you like. Whereas this was different. It was high pressure. It was for some reason. It received a great deal of attention. Well, I say for some reason, it received a great deal of attention for obvious reasons. The mood in the country was very fraught, and the mood in particular about the implementing the referendum was very fraught, and this was seen as a very significant political case. And as it happens, it also raised some very important constitutional issues. So both to a lawyer and to somebody interested in politics, it was high profile, and the two factors made it a very significant case, and ensured that it had a lot of publicity among academic lawyers, constitutionalists, as well as the public generally and the media.
One thing we noticed was the mainstream media wasn't simply interested in the legal issues of the case. They were interested in you and your colleagues and the advocates. Like Lord Panic, like a clothing range came out a couple of weeks after this case because he was seen as such a celebrity. But the mainstream media is questioning your political neutrality, independence of the judges, all these big constitutional principles. How difficult is it for you, as a judge and as a person, just to stay focused on the cold, hard law and just, block out the fact that there's about 200 people outside with cameras and, mobile phones, etc.?
I can't speak for my subconscious. As I say, I became aware of my subconscious when I thought I was nervous. But consciously, one's aware of it. It adds a bit to the pressure. But I can't say it makes a great deal of difference. One's used to the fact that from time to time cases you decide attract a lot of attention before you decide them or after you decide them. This was of a different order, as I say. But I think like doctors dealing with very ill children and like other professionals and journalists and so on, one just has to concentrate on the job, and if you can't do that, then you shouldn't be doing the job. Sure. It can't. I don't pretend it can have no effect on you. Of course, you're aware of it, but you actually just have to put your head down and get on with it.
And do you think you did a successful job in doing so?
I think that's for others to judge.
And because of the pressure, but also because of the interesting legal issues that this case brought up, do you think Miller's a highlight in your judicial career, or maybe actually a bit of a low light?
I suppose I'm going to have a lawyer's answer. It depends what you mean by a highlight or a low light. It certainly was a highlight in that it stands out. I mean, in 20 years' time, I might be very surprised at the answer to the question, what was the most important case you decided while you were President of the Supreme Court, because history often looks at things in a way that seems very unexpected or would seem very unexpected to the people that history is looking at. But certainly, viewed today, I'd have to say that the Miller case was the highlight, in the sense that it was, or perhaps it was a spotlight case that during my 5 years. And certainly, what I was very pleased about, and I'm not just saying it because he's here, was the magnificent way that the staff coped with it, both in our communication side and on the other side behind the scenes. That was really good, and I think the way that the public, the way the lawyers, the way that journalists were treated in terms of with respect and kept informed and accommodated as far as they properly could be, but couldn't have been improved. So, well, it's up for others to judge how the judges did. I really was very pleased with the way that the court staff all coped, worked hard and successfully.
Brilliant. And is there any other case, decision, moment for you that stands out as a real firm highlight?
No, not really, and I'm pleased about that, because Miller apart, I mean, obviously some cases I enjoyed more than others, some cases I think are more important than others, some judgments I'm more pleased with than others, but on the whole, the way that courts should work is getting on with the cases, doing them in a workmanlike way. Inevitably you're going to find that some are more interesting than others, but in a way looking for highlights, looking for moments of glory is precisely what judges shouldn't do. We should, generally speaking, be below the radar. Just getting on with it, making sure the rule of law is maintained, that respect for the legal system is maintained, and doing our job, which is to interpret and develop the law within the confines of our common law system.
If I may, I'd just like to finish with two kind of general final questions for you. You know, you've been president of the Supreme Court for some years now, and from our point of view, we believe you've been a very good, well-liked president.
Thank you.
What is it exactly that you're going to miss most about the job? Sorry, it's a bit of a negative one.
It's all right. It's well, I suggest you come back in 6 months and ask me then.
Cool.
I think it does have a comfort zone. I think I said in my valedictory, for 21 years, I've been a train or a tram going along rails. And if you're in a job you like, where everything is in general terms predictable, I know when I come in what I'm going to be doing. I know I'm going to be hearing cases. I know I'm going to have to sort out some administrative things and so on. But it's all reasonably predictable. And suddenly I'm, as it were, coming off the rails, and I hope not literally, but and going into a different world. And I suppose it's coming out of one's comfort zone, which I will miss. But I hope and tend to think that I'll find it enjoyable in my new life. But I will miss this, miss the colleagues, miss the staff, miss the job. I like, it's rather sad if one doesn't after doing it for 21 years, but I like sitting in court, listening to arguments. I like writing judgments. I quite like preparing for hearings. I quite like reading colleagues' judgments.
Do you think you're going to keep doing that? You'll be watching on the Supreme Court live stream.
I don't think I will. I think I will. I will. On the whole, I don't intend to, as it were, come back or look back too much. I hope I'll see my colleagues socially or legal events from time to time. I hope to keep in touch with some members of the staff here. But I think sort of coming back and looking at hearings is not something I really would relish. I think I should get on with the next stage.
Yeah, breaking out of your comfort zone.
Yes, breaking out of my comfort zone. Also, I think if I come back here much, it'll be a bit like a ghost coming back to haunt everybody.
I'm sure you'll be very welcome back. And then final question, again, I'm sorry, this is a bit of a negative one to end on, but I mean, again, this may be a better place to answer this in a couple of months' time, but looking back, if you could have your time again, do you think there's anything you would do differently?
I think that one thing I think I would try and exercise a little bit more control on getting judgments done and keeping more control on, insofar as one can, on myself and my colleagues in making sure that we're giving attention to judgments, to each other's judgments, and getting stuff through, getting judgments out. I think there have been times when we've had a bit of a logjam. Most of the times we've had a logjam, it's been at least partly explained by the fact that a case was held up because we had another similar case later, and we had to make sure that the cases, that our judgments worked together, as it were, in the two cases, or we had a bulk of three very difficult cases that took a lot of time to ensure that we all agreed. But nonetheless, there have been times where I could and should have done more. And I think looking back on it, I might have tried to, I regret not having tried to introduce some more control over that. Whether it would have worked or not, I don't know, but I think I should have tried harder.
There's no judgment or case per se that you have any particular regrets as to your handling, or?
Of course, there are cases where I think I could have done better. I'm afraid there are even sometimes cases where one looks, and that's true throughout a judicial career, and I think it's probably true about decisions made by people in any career. There are decisions that I do wonder whether I got right. Yeah. It's not very nice once you've given a judgment to think a bit later, I think I may not have been right, but that's life. Nobody gets everything absolutely right all the time.
Brilliant. Lord Neuberger, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.